When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. I would like to die on Mars. Just not on impact. I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. I could either watch it happen or be a part of it. You want to have a future where you're expecting things to be better, not one where you're expecting things to be worse. You shouldn't do things differently just because they're different. They need to be better. You shouldn't give up unless you're forced to give up. Great companies are built on great products. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. There's a tremendous bias against taking risks. Everyone is trying to optimize their ass covering. The path to the CEO's office should not be through the CFO's office, and it should not be through the marketing department. It needs to be through engineering and design. If something has to be designed and invented, it means we don't know how to do it yet. It's okay to have your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket. I don't spend my time pontificating about high-concept things. I spend my time solving engineering and manufacturing problems. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I don't create companies for the sake of creating companies, but to get things done. It is possible for a company to succeed and have a positive impact on the world at the same time. People work better when they know what the goal is and why. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it's not. Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up. I don't think it's a good idea to plan to sell a company. The only thing that makes sense to do is strive for greater collective enlightenment. I don't believe in process. In fact, when I interview a potential employee and he or she says that it's all about the process, I see that as a bad sign. The problem is that at a lot of big companies, process becomes a substitute for thinking. You're encouraged to behave like a little gear in a complex machine. Frankly, it allows you to keep people who aren't that smart, who aren't that creative. You shouldn't do things differently just because they're different. They need to be better. I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. If you want to grow a giant redwood, you need to make sure the seeds are okay. Nurture the sapling, and work out what might potentially stop it from growing all the way along. Anything that breaks it at any point stops that growth. It's very important to like the people you work with, otherwise, life and your job is gonna be quite miserable. The future is much more exciting and interesting if we're a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planetary species than if we're not. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. If you want to make $1 million, you better solve a problem that's worth $1 million. If something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur. The problem with big companies is that they get bloated and slow. Scale is not an unmixed blessing. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. The tough thing about getting to orbit is that space is just hard. Rockets are big flying pressure vessels that have to work perfectly. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. I don't think it's good to achieve too much at too young an age. What else can the future give you if you've already got all that your imagination has dreamt up for you? You have to be pretty driven to make it happen. Otherwise, you will just make yourself miserable. You want to have a future where you're expecting things to be better, not one where you're expecting things to be worse. I do think there is a lot of potential if you have a compelling product and people are willing to pay a premium for that. I think that is what Apple has shown. You can buy a much cheaper cell phone or laptop, but Apple's product is so much better than the alternative, and people are willing to pay that premium. If you're co-founder or CEO, you have to do all kinds of tasks you might not want to do. If you don't do your chores, the company won't succeed. No task is too menial. I think the best way to learn anything is by trying to teach yourself. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. I think life on Earth must be about more than just solving problems. It's got to be something inspiring, even if it is vicarious.